I would love to fight Jake Paul. And I'm 39, a little bit past my prime. I'd be a perfect fight. Jake, if you're watching, I'm telling you, I'd be a perfect fight. You wouldn't beat me, but I would be a perfect fight for you. What's up and welcome to Fight City Gym Talk. You are here with Eric Wallin. I keep getting that question. Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. And that's a very good question, and that's it's very intriguing to think. It would be a 2-fight deal, which would be Jake Paul versus Nate in boxing and then also again in MMA. First things first, is it going to really go down? We keep seeing these potential fights, but nobody really wants to sign the contracts, and that's because we know that it's got to be in best interest for both fighters. And the fact is, nobody wants to risk getting beat up by a guy that's not really a boxer when you're not going to get paid. No MMA fighter is now going to want to risk getting beat up in MMA if he's not getting paid. And so the fact is, I understand on both sides, Jake Paul's only going to do this if it's going to really help build him. So he kind of really needs to win. So he needs to find that guy that is beatable. The reason it's a 2-fight deal is because I think he knows that he's not going to beat him in MMA. So hopefully he can at least beat him in boxing. And that's the way I see it, to be honest with you. I think, in my opinion, that Nate Diaz beats him comfortably in MMA. I think his jiu-jitsu is just going to be way too good. And Jake Paul, but he was a wrestler in high school. No, that his wrestling in high school doesn't compete with what Nate Diaz has been doing for years in the MMA and jiu-jitsu world. So it's not the same thing. And then the other thing is boxing. Well, when it comes to boxing, I kind of do give the edge to Jake Paul. That's why the 2-fight deal makes sense. I think they both get to kind of go home and think to themselves well, I still did good, right? I beat him in my sport, MMA, or Jake Paul can be I beat him in my sport, boxing, but I lost in his sport. No big deal. Now, what really matters, are they both happy with the money they're going to get out of this? Now, here's the thing. That's where we get into the business side of this. The business side is Jake Paul is now signed with PFL. That's huge. Jake Paul signing with PFL brings a whole new dynamic to the sport of MMA that hasn't existed in basically all of MMA history. MMA history quickly looks like this. UFC pops up, it's about to go out of business, it's sold to Dana White, Dana White revives it, brings new life into the sport, and now it is what we know. So a lot of people talk trash on Dana White because he's not paying the fighters fairly, but at the end of the day, it is a free country. They don't have to fight for Dana White, and they're doing it because they appreciate the money they're getting paid and the titles they're getting, the recognition they're getting from the UFC. So they don't have to fight for Dana White. They don't have to fight for the UFC, but there really isn't a better option out there until maybe now with PFL. Personally, at my age, if I were to fight again, I would be way more excited about fighting for PFL than any other organization, even the UFC. I like the concept that I could get into a tournament and within a year make $1 million. In the UFC, if you don't make a big splash, if you don't have a big draw, you might get lost in the mix and never get offered that title fight and never make your $1 million. So in my mind, a lot of things Jake Paul was saying was 50% of the revenue will go to the fighters, or 50% of the pay-per-views. I guarantee there's going to be a lot of stipulations, a lot of contracts going into that, where only certain fighters on certain pay-per-views, this, that, and the other, but that's all to be determined. We don't know how that's really going to pan out. And they're going to get their own sponsors. Fighters could make upwards towards $100,000 per fight on sponsors alone if they're free to go get their own sponsors. And even more, there's really no limit to the amount of money you can make on sponsorships. So with all this being said, a lot of fighters, I guarantee you, are going to rather and prefer just go fight for PFL. Does that put UFC out of business? Absolutely not. The UFC will be just fine. They might have to make some adjustments, but they'll be fine. And the thing is, both Ford and Chevy coexist and make tons of money. So at the end of the day, I think both UFC and PFL, PFL is obviously making some big moves that will probably force the UFC to make some moves as well to stay competitive. and to keep their edge, because I do think the UFC has the edge right now. But I do think the UFC is going to need to do either pay more or get bigger draws, bigger fight. I know Conor McGregor's talking about coming back. So what happens? In my opinion, I would like to see PFL go next level. I'd like to see PFL draw in fighters that everybody's like, dude, this guy is the best guy in the world, and he's fighting for the PFL right now. Let's go back to Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. What if Nate Diaz doesn't sign? What if this fight doesn't go through? I want to see Jake Paul fight MMA. I think we all want to see Jake Paul fight MMA. He's out there knocking guys out in boxing. Can he do the same in MMA? And my opinion is no. Now, I would love to fight Jake Paul. And I think I'd be a great fight for him. I'm about the same weight class. I meet him wherever he wants to meet. I'd love to fight him. And it's not just me. It's like anybody kind of where I'm at. Good MMA fighter, would like to collect a big payday, but isn't the best in the world, right? And I'm 39, a little bit past my prime. I'd be perfect for Jake. If you're watching, I'm telling you, I'd be a perfect fight. You wouldn't beat me, but I would be a perfect fight for you. And I'd also do the 2-fight deal with the 1 fight in boxing and also 1 fight in MMA. He'll never take the fight, but I represent a guy that I would like to see Jake Paul fight. Someone that is not top level, not world renowned and known, but basically like, hey, here's a pretty good guy with a pretty good record. Can you beat him? But he doesn't want that fight. I'm telling you, the fight he wants is Nate Diaz. Why? Because it's going to pay a ton. And he can lose to Nate Diaz and be like, don't worry, I'm going to beat him in boxing. So, like I say, when it comes to contracts, everybody has to be happy. And right now, he's really putting his neck out on the line, because could Nate Diaz beat him in boxing? And the answer is absolutely yes. Nate Diaz could beat him. I do think Jake Paul will win. I personally do think Jake Paul will beat him in boxing. I don't think he stands a chance against Nate Diaz in MMA. And all I'm saying, if that fight doesn't go down, Jake, you need to find somebody. And if you can't find anybody, I promise I'll take that fight. Anyway, hopefully something goes down. We all see good things happen in the MMA industry because of it all. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment. We'll talk to you later. I would love to fight Jake Paul. You wouldn't beat me, but I would be a perfect fight for you.